Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. On the agenda tonight we have Doug Aldrich, and this is going to be coming from 2006 and it's when he's playing with Dio. I've been to see Doug live with Whitesnake a few times as well, so I'm very familiar with his playing, but let's get him up on screen and see how Doug gets on. I'm just going to jump in here because already we've had so much technique from Doug, and the thing about Doug's playing is his left hand always looks really unique in the way that he's always got that classical hand position where the thumb's behind the neck. With a lot of players, they tend to have that thumb over the top when they're playing any kind of fast passage or even slow passages with the first finger and third finger where there isn't a great deal of a stretch. When they then want to start playing more notes on one string and have to stretch out with the little finger as well, that's when they then tend to jump into that classical position. But Doug is always in that position. He will throw that thumb over the top if he wants to get a root note of a chord in there with his playing. He's got that option, but Doug spends most of his time behind the fretboard with a thumb, which means that his fingers look very flat. You might see other players that have a very arched over left hand when they're playing lead guitar, whereas Doug is very flat, so just that left hand really has a unique look to it. It really falls under the category of players, like I say before in other videos, that they've worked out their own way of playing, something that works for them. And generally, when you get to top speeds and start to really speed up your playing, you then have to play for your own genetics, your own size of hand, your own right hand, and sometimes you see a lot of difference in the right hand, but here we can see a lot of unique playing with the left hand that Doug's got on. And just focusing on that right hand for a second, Doug's got great alternate picking ability, but also economy picking, the way that he effectively does those little mini sweeps between strings so that he can follow on those notes consecutively. And if you don't know what economy picking is, it's when you have effectively two downstrokes in a row rather than alternate picking all the time, which is going to be down, up, down, up, down, up. But by changing to economy picking, it makes it, obviously, like it sounds, the most efficient way to get from one note to the next note, because sometimes the most efficient way isn't always with alternate picking. But that economy picking, that effective sweeping motion between the strings, Doug absolutely nails that, and it's how he can follow notes so quickly after each other because he's absolutely mastered that technique. But then when he gets into his alternate picking as well, he starts to do a little bit of a wider motion with that right hand, and it's almost like strumming on one string. So you can see when he gets into his alternate picking that right hand's just going up and down, obviously because that's what alternate picking is, but it's quite a wild motion he's got going on there, but absolutely nails it with that synchronization with the left hand as well. So all round, really technical playing here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward it to another section of this solo because this is 10 minutes long. I'm not going to have time to look at the whole solo. I'm going to put the link in the description below so you guys can check out the whole video if you want to. But I'm going to move it forward a little bit just to show Doug's change in dynamic and the way that he can play slow as well. And listen out for his trademark wide vibrato. It's a really wide vibrato that you'll always get with Doug. Again, he's made it his own. It's his own sound that he really gets. You know when it's Doug playing because of that vibrato. But let's get a little bit into some slightly different, more dynamic playing. Again, cleaner tone is going to be coming in here. So let's listen out for Doug's playing now. And there we go. There's the end of that little show-off solo section. And I love it when the rest of the band gets involved in a solo section of lead guitar playing. You'll always find it live that the solo will always happen somewhere where the lead guitarist comes out on stage, goes to the front of the stage and just a little solo section. And once it's backed up with keys and then with drums and bass as well, it gives it such a great context, and you can get so much more musicality from that show-off piece because now you've got a reference point to actually, pin it on. So sometimes when guitarists come out front and they start playing a lot of different scales and a lot of notes, sometimes not having that reference point, you can lose a lot of people that aren't necessarily into a lot of lead playing and fast playing. But sometimes when you give a context, it is now so much more listenable for everyone. People that play guitar like myself, I kind of get into everything anyway without any backing, just because I love looking at people's techniques and the way that players go about things differently. We could see here in that little part where it's really low dynamically in terms of really brought it down, cleaner tone. And I love it when Doug plays in that really controlled, understated way, not playing a whole lot of speed, but throwing in his trademark vibrato in there and really feeling his way through the lead. It is so obvious with Doug where he's alternate picking and where he's economy picking and sweep picking, and just the contrast between those two techniques, because even though it sounds really fast and it is really fast, Doug's combination of hammer-ons and pull-offs with the left hand and economy picking with the right hand, you'll see the right hand is so controlled in those really super fast sections because he's being so accurate with that right hand. And then when he gets into the alternate picking, it's a lot more evident. You can see that right hand going up and down all the time. And then when he'll get into the hammer-ons, pull-offs and economy picking, it's really controlled. That right hand is now on a dime. He's exactly where he wants to be on each string, and he'll just absolutely nail it. Another thing is Doug's definitely got the ability to play slow. It's one of those things that I mention all the time about a lot of fast guitarists fall into the trap of always playing fast, or when they do play slowly, it kind of shows them up a little bit because they haven't spent a lot of time playing slowly or trying to master how to emote and get these notes to sing in slower sections. Whereas of course, if you play fast all the time, you never need to spend any great deal of time on a single note. It's almost like losing control of the playing. You want to be in control all the time so that you can play really fast, but then when you finished your fast section and go into something a bit slower, you can now emote, get really nice wide vibrato and a slightly faster vibrato if you want it. And all the great players have got control of that. Gary Moore comes to mind when he could really play the blues so well, emoting through the guitar, such a slow wide vibrato, and then he'll just up the ante and start bending and increasing the frequency of that vibrato, speeding it up for the emotion that he wants to get at any particular time. But he was a classic player that could do that. Doug is also in that bracket. I'm not comparing Gary Moore with Doug Aldrich. I'm just explaining about a technique and having total control of it. And also in that end section, when the band then start getting involved, he really then starts to explore more scales, taking us down different avenues, and it makes it so much more interesting, breaking away from those standard minor pentatonics and major pentatonics as well, and blues scale, but throwing in more of those other scales. Egyptian scale was in there as well. It's always going to make that playing interesting, which after 10 minutes of soloing, you've got to really chop and change it up all the time. We saw here Doug has really brought down the dynamic as well, started up high, brought the dynamic low, and then ended up high as well. A classic way to keep the interest with a really long solo section. So Doug Aldrich, what a fantastic player, super consistent live, and whichever band he's with, he always puts a personal stamp on a solo section because of the way he sounds. He's got his own sound, which is a super rare thing to have in the first place. Also, a lot of people will say that Doug is underrated, not as many people know him as they should, but I think if you've seen Doug and you understand his playing and have checked him out for any length of time, you won't underrate him because he's just absolutely up there with some of the best players in the world. He just has his own style and his own sound. So Doug, really up there. If you don't know him, check out his playing. Like I said, he's been with so many bands. He can just slot in and just add so much to a track that already exists. He could just throw something else in the works, and especially works well live when he starts to throw in something that's a little bit different to the recording. So he's got that up his sleeve as well. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at. Keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!